of applause as we call on stage Brian Gahan, Managing Director for Europe at Kraken. Welcome, great to have you. Thanks everyone, well done. And Matthew Gravelle, Managing Director Digital Assets. And if you want to see it on the other way around, so we have you just in front of your face and name. Big round of applause, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good to see you all. It's not often, I think, that a fireside chat or a panel sort of gives away the thesis or the lead quite so clearly in the title. There's not even a question mark to be seen. But we will delve into it, and we will justify, I think, the rather strong and punchy statement. Nice to see you all. Thanks for coming. Matthew Gravelle. I'm at Forefront, which is a political and regulatory intelligence firm covering digital assets, covering other topics as well. Obviously, there aren't many topics that require more intelligence or analysis than MiCA implementation and the future of policy in the digital asset space. And that's why it's great to be joined by Brian from Kraken, the Managing Director for Europe. And I think we'll just jump right into it. First, obviously, we'd love to hear from Brian about Kraken's stance on MiCA and your positioning in the EU and where you see it going.
Cool, thanks, Matt. Just to introduce myself briefly, I worked in the TradFi space for many years and developed an interest in crypto, mostly on a speculative basis, I guess, around 2016, 17. But then went deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole and became very interested in the space. And I've been working in it since 2019 and kind of aligns nicely with it coming into the regulated space because I'd always worked in regulated roles. And now here we are, less than 30 days from the implementation of MiCA for CASP. So it's a really exciting time, particularly for Kraken. I think when you look at what we've done in Europe, particularly to date. So Kraken has an e-money institution in Ireland where we passport across Europe, provide regulated fiat payment services to all our clients across the EEA. We have registered VASPs in a number of European jurisdictions, France, Italy, Spain, Netherlands, to name a few. And what Kraken does, I guess, is, for those of you who don't know, our bread and butter is providing a kind of seamless on-ramp into the crypto world, 24/7, 365, for all our clients. Our core products, I guess, are fiat payment rails in all the big currencies, and then our spot exchange, where which provides liquidity and access to these assets, more than 200 assets for all our clients around the world. We're very excited about MiCA. It's been a long time in the making. We've advocated strongly for it from day one. We think it provides a level playing field and a clear set of rules for everybody to operate in this space in Europe and provide forge the right level of consumer protections and to all clients, and so they know what they're getting. And I think we're really kind of anticipating a wave or surge or wave of interest into the space and increased retail participation, and from just the smallest investor, the individual who wants to get into the space and learn about it. They can do that on Kraken Learn Center. We're all about customer experience, client experience, and security. People who want to invest in a product, whether it's crypto or anything, want to know that their assets are safe and secure, and they also should understand what they're buying. So that's really what we're about, and we're going to go deeper into the space once MiCA comes into effect.
So I think a very clear position and posture there, very supportive of MiCA, leaning into it, as the kids say, and expecting it to unleash more traffic, more activity, more confidence, and certainly sounds like part of Kraken's EU strategy, which I guess begs the question of, if MiCA's good, why not more MiCA? What's your view on this question of MiCA 2.0? Obviously, MiCA, as we've discussed in detail yesterday, didn't cover everything, doesn't do everything, maybe leaves some questions unanswered. Couldn't some of those holes be filled? Couldn't some of those questions be answered? Why don't we need MiCA 2.0 at this time, Brian?
Well, I'd start out by saying, like, it's important to understand that MiCA in and of itself is truly a paradigm shift, right? We're talking about this massive cross-border industry that is, made up of global players and is coming into the fully prudentially regulated space for the first time. We're not talking about changing an existing framework, say like MiFID 1 to MiFID 2 or beyond. We're talking about this big, large industry with a clear set of rules and policies and procedures and operationalizing process that they must do. So, if you're starting talking about a MiCA 2.0, and the dust certainly has not settled on MiCA. It hasn't, there isn't any authorized CASPs out there yet. So we don't have, there's a danger of regulatory fatigue from the industry, from regulators, So just to unpack that a little bit more, what I'd say is, like, from the point of view of the regulators and the national competent authorities and governments, we need to give time. So there has been some frustration across Europe with the various national discretions, implementing MiCA and statutory instruments and delays in certain countries and transition periods and so on. So let's finish out that piece of work. I know in certain countries, the statutory instrument to appoint the local national competent authority was only done in very recent weeks. So that's one piece. And we're aware that supervisory practices for existing frameworks do differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. We advocate strongly for a position of supervisory convergence because we have this clear set of rules in the level 1 text now. We want that implemented in a harmonized, similar way across all of Europe so that the same standards are applied. So an EU retail individual or institutional investors, no matter where they're obtaining those services, as long as it's in the EU from a MiCA authorized player, then we want to see that the same. And I think it'll take time over the course of the next year see what is working. Do the national competent authorities need to engage with ESMA, and there's scope for further guidance. We've seen some ESMA opinions already. Secondly, even for the industry itself, right? The uplift, yes, it codifies practices that large players like Kraken have already been doing, but even the uplift and operationalizing those processes takes time, and hiring people. MiCA allows big players like Kraken to invest with confidence that crypto is here to stay and the regime is here to stay. So that takes time in and of itself. And then thirdly, I'd say as well, there are discretions in terms of level 2s and level 3s, further guidance. So there's still, MiCA can be adjusted if things are truly not working. And then the final thing I'd round up on this one is what I'd say is, yes, MiCA, there's first mover advantage, and it's great that the EU and the Commission and so on and so forth have codified MiCA and gone first. We've seen in other jurisdictions, the UK starting to move towards some sort of crypto framework. And yes, there's an advantage to going first, and maybe the landscape has shifted in the US, and I'm sure we'll see something there. But this technology, crypto, is so novel. There's so much innovation in the space. Maybe it's, the right thing to do is to see what new technologies in the space emerge, how they're regulated, if MiCA is truly missing something, let's leverage the other frameworks as they come in, and then we can move towards a more globally regulated product. But yeah, to conclude, I think, no, we wouldn't advocate for MiCA 2.0, certainly not any time in the future. And there are natural checkpoints along the way, EU Commission reports, maybe in 2027. So yeah, let's wait and see.
It's interesting to hear you talk about that international dimension around the case against MiCA 2.0, I suppose. The idea that, and we've heard a lot about MiCA as a pace setter, as you said, and the potential competitive advantage, the Brussels effect that brings. And I think it sounds a little bit like what you're suggesting is that's true as far as it goes, but there are also places where MiCA is silent. There are also places where MiCA maybe didn't quite get it right. We've heard about some of the pressure maybe on the stablecoin business model, et cetera. Maybe time to actually watch and see what other jurisdictions do and then sort of recalibrate, take a breath. So there's advantage to being a first mover from a competitive point of view, but there's maybe also a time to reflect and take a look at what others are doing as you sort of expand further on a potential future framework.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess one specific example around that is staking. Like MiCA doesn't regulate staking per se. However, if you're going to offer staking to your customers under MiCA, it would require a custody permission. So that does bring it into the regulatory sphere somewhat. And like we've seen in the UK, they're moving towards clarifying that this definitely isn't, say, a UCIT where it would fall under a traditional financial framework or a previously existing financial framework. And they're talking about their own, its own specific regime for staking. But like in the EU, perhaps there's room for further guidance and clarifications around staking because it is, it's such a key part of the industry, and I'm very passionate about Ethereum and Solana, and we want the retail base and the institutional base across Europe to be able to access staking, and they can do it in a kind of safe, protected, consumer protected manner under Kraken with our hopeful custody permission. But yeah, there's scope to adjust via guidance, and yeah, let's see what other frameworks do.
I think that's a very nice concrete example at sort of at this moment of time that it will indeed be interesting to see what the UK does on staking. Just before I turn to asking you a little bit about where you see things going in the absence of a MiCA 2.0, let's call it the market more broadly, I do want to ask, because you were talking about the dust settling and the need for this bedding down process to really, give the industry and regulators room and time to get things right. There has been, and I'm sure many people in this room will be aware, noise the last fortnight around a potential delay, the industry asking for a delay to MiCA, non-enforcement, various versions of that floating around. Do you have a view on whether a delay, you said 30 days, I think it's less. Do you have a view on that, the prospect of a delay and whether that would be helpful?
Yeah, well, I have read the articles, and I guess my very firm position would be no, I would not advocate for a delay in MiCA. I think where some of that came from was there was confusion around different lengths of transition periods, and there were some delays around RTSs and things like that, and it got bundled up into articles, and it was like, industry wants a delay of MiCA. No, we don't, or I don't, and Kraken doesn't. We want to afford the consumer protections across Europe to all of our clients and beyond. We know that's coming, and we've been preparing for it for a long time. So I would never advocate for a delay around that. The way I think we can get around those or deal with some of the challenges of timing and sequencing and things like that is a collaborative approach to the implementation between the big players like Kraken and the regulators and national competent authorities, and an understanding that we can work together to, I guess, ensure there's smoother sailing than might happen otherwise over the next, say, 18 months as we see the first authorized CASPs and different transition periods hopefully elapse, and then we can look forward from that point. So I hope I was clear enough.
Yeah, there's a speaking of clarity, there's a big gray area, isn't there, between no delay and delay, and that gray area, as you said, is about dialogue with regulators, flexibility in terms of what gets applied on day 1 versus day 20 versus day 200. And conversations around some of those murky questions where implementation's maybe not settled. And sounds like Kraken's happy to live in that gray area as opposed to push for one of the poles. Okay, so no delay, no MiCA 2.0. I think some very clear positioning there. Talk to us a little bit, put your Europe MD hat on and talk to us a little bit about where you see Europe in 2026, 2027, 2028 as MiCA does bed down and where Kraken sees things going, let's say, commercially.
Yeah, so what MiCA does for Kraken is it allows us to, really think about bringing our best-in-class products to a wider client base across Europe. And we, obviously the pace of innovation in crypto, the pace of innovation in Kraken is lightning speed, and now we can offer those clients who may be coming into the space because of the anticipated surge in interest. They can understand that they're buying a product or accessing a product or an asset class on a regulated player like Kraken. They can, really take comfort in that, I guess I could say. So one thing I would certainly hope for is a kind of surge of retail participation in the space. And crypto, to me, is, here to stay. When I first got into the space in 2019, like even it's only 5 years ago, but there was, I remember at the time people asking me like, oh, well, like, will that be around tomorrow? Like, I think that's beyond doubt, like for me anyway, in my head. The asset class in and of itself is worth more than 3 trillion, I should say, in terms of total size. We've hundreds of billions of stable coins out there. We've seen an increase in the number of hopefully MiCA compliant stablecoin projects. We've seen USDQ launched in the Netherlands and so on and so forth. So really just bringing those new products, but in a kind of consumer protected manner to the 450 million plus people in the EU. To bring it back to another point that I kind of made earlier was, we know that the G20 nations, or most of them, are really looking at ways to regulate crypto now as well. What we don't really have, and I know IOSCO have done some work in this area, is a kind of globalized approach to regulating crypto with like a harmonized taxonomy. Because what I wouldn't want to see is that big framework like MiCA comes in, then another jurisdiction goes a different way, and then you have a truly global cross-border industry that, where some aspects of it are excluded, or some participants are excluded because under that framework this product doesn't work, and so on and so forth. So it's this kind of more globalized cross-border approach, not just whether it's the EU or the UK or the US, that I'd hope to see, so that ultimately, the participants in the market, whether it's retail or institutional around the world, kind of can access the same products with the same protections. So I'd hope to see more development in that space over the next 3 years.
A few minutes left, just over 5, and I will see if there are any questions, but you just mentioned the word institutional, expecting a retail wave, hoping for greater international alignment and less fragmentation. What do you see on the institutional side, and sort of what's Kraken's USP in that space and play right now and over the next little while?
Yeah, so I mean, one thing that we've obviously seen a wave of institutional interest in the space, particularly since earlier in this year when the ETFs were launched in the US. So again, there were, at the time it was like, well, does this compete with the large players? But it's complementary. It brings more interest in the space. It allows people to access crypto via an equities product, and there's a nice little convergence with Kraken as well, and that many people don't know this, but we have a business called CF Benchmarks, which provides the indices for the pricing for those ETF products for over 50% of the ones that have already been issued. So that's a nice little tie back to Kraken, and again, it's just evidence of it being complementary to the space, not only from that point of view, but also like the liquidity in the markets is provided by players like Kraken for the rebalancing of the ETFs, and ultimately it brings volume and interest in the space. So I would definitely welcome it with open arms, and hopefully we'll see an ETF with staking rewards as soon as possible, because again, I want to advocate for the best possible outcome for the market.
So I think a nice set of clear institutional and retail prognoses, and I think you've done a nice job too, Brian, of tying the sort of current moment around MiCA implementation and this debate around MiCA 2.0 and all the reviews that'll be taking place, as we know, from a statutory point of view over the next months and years, tying that into this international moment quite nicely and putting the EU and MiCA in a global perspective, both in terms of harmonization, but also maybe not always having feet on the gas and maybe sometimes learning from and being dynamic and responding to what's happening in other jurisdictions as well. Got a few minutes, and I wonder if there's any questions from the audience for Brian before we yield the stage and help the gang get back on time. Any questions? No?
Okay.
Any last words, Brian?
No, but looking forward to what 2025 and beyond brings for Europe and crypto, and particularly poignant that we're here in Brussels to do this. So thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Matthew. And of course, we're very happy that Kraken continues to be a great member of Blockchain for Europe, a sponsor of this conference, of course. And there is a lot, as Brian just said, there's a lot more of work to do in 2025. So we're very excited to be doing that all together.